Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Rocket Lab Weekly episode 11. Cannot believe it has been 11 episodes already. And I'm here with Matt Money and Dave Graham. I probably butchered it. And everyone's YouTube channels and Twitter is in the description box below. Please make sure that you follow these guys. And yeah, lots to talk about this week. How has your guys' week been?
Can't complain, man. Launch Gang is doing well. The Launch Gang is doing well.
Yeah.
And what about you, Hot Dave?
Yeah, pretty good. Unfortunately, I didn't make as many videos as I wanted to. It was pretty busy with like the 9 to 5 and stuff, but had a good time with the launch. And yeah, overall it was a pretty good week.
Yeah, the launch was freaking fantastic. It was my first launch as a Rocket Lab shareholder, and it was like snap and pop, to the point, very Peter Beck-ish, I felt. But the stock did something really crazy this week. So I was actually preparing for this episode and I looked it up. We started the week at 4.72. And then at one point during the week, we were 546, which is 15.6% up. And it was Friday morning, and we managed to close the week 18% less than the peak at 461, which is crazy volatile. I've never seen, it's not true, never seen, but it's crazy volatile. And this is all after a successful launch. I mean, Dave, you warned me on the live stream that you have seen this before, that the stock goes down. But I was thinking when you say the stock goes down after launch, that it's like, 0.5% or something like this.
Yeah. But I've seen it happen a few times after launch, and it really threw me. Like the first launch I watched, it was probably down about 5% the next day, but not to this extreme either. And I was thinking we would probably buck the trend this time just because, it's such good news and the market overall seems to be doing well. But the opposite was true. It was even worse. So,
yeah, I think I have a bunch of people, not a bunch, I shouldn't say, but I have a few people that I've convinced to buy Rocket Lab that are looking for slightly more risky plays other than maybe just the S&P 500. And so they were all excited. They were like, this thing's going to go moon, right? Because obviously we haven't had a successful launch since September. And we've been on hiatus for a little bit. And I was like, I wouldn't be so sure about that. And when I was looking at pre-market, I was like, maybe we are doing something different. Because normally, the stock is always up plus or minus 5%. So I was like, maybe this is going to be something different. Because I saw Vince post about it. I saw a few others. And then I look at it. I'm like, did they get the plus wrong for a minus? Because it's down. I was like, what the heck is going on here? But I'm used to it. I think this is, I don't know how many launches I've been through as an investor now. I've been investing since March 2021. So, I guess pre-SPAC, I guess even. So I guess it all depends on how many have been officially under my belt. But yeah, I'm used to the stock not moving so much after a launch.
Okay, so if we translate the stock movement, so if we launch a rocket and it's successful, we go down. If we launch a rocket and it fails, we go down. So I think we just stop launching rockets and then
Rocket Lab is zero, man.
That's the answer, I guess. Just don't bother launching. I saw a funny stat. I don't know if it was Twitter or a Rocket Lab stockholders Facebook group. It was in one of those places. Someone said, I didn't confirm this is true, but it sounds correct to me. They said we had a bigger negative stock movement after this successful return to launch than we did when the anomaly happened after that failed launch. So I was like, that is wild to me. Yeah.
I think what it might have been is people potentially selling into the strength, maybe. I don't know. That's what at least I'm trying to tell myself.
But it's so funny. I'm curious what you guys think, because when I look at everything, I think that it's such a good setup that we have. So Papa Powell came out and he's basically saying that we're going towards rate cuts, right? And basically that's super good macro for Rocket Lab. Then this successful launch is basically starting a period in Rocket Lab's history where we are having a launch cadence of a launch every 17 days next year. We are in 2 weeks starting the first $100 million quarter, which is like almost 100% up from Q1 2023, and I'm like, everything is amazing, like setup wise, and then we begin this period, and then we go 10% minus. Like,
yeah,
what? I was literally like, who the F is selling? Like, who thinks it's a good idea to
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's algorithms or what. It's funny because when I checked in the pre-market, and then I was working with my day job. Then I didn't check again until later, and then I looked. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, am I seeing this wrong? But I don't know if you guys know this, but every now and then I just for fun have very small value, like short-term trades I do around Rocket Lab or other companies. And I bought a call option a little while ago, thinking like it was due for a move. And then so on Thursday, I was like, okay, yeah, this is going to turn out well for me. And then of course it plummeted. So we're not looking so good anymore. But yeah, long term, still very, even though I like to have fun with those short-term trades, and it's always like $200 maybe, but long term, the way to go. And eventually I think the earnings will just support a stock price that, can't really be denied. So,
well, the only short-term trades I do are I do short puts. So I sell puts at about $5.
Yeah, I've done that too.
Every month I roll them. So it just because I know it's just like, I don't mind acquiring here. I don't have the capital to acquire right here right now, but I wish I did have a little bit more capital to acquire right here. But because I'd love to get to 10,000 shares or even 20,000, but I just, maybe beginning of the year, some things will change and I'll get a little bit more cash flow to be able to buy some every month. But I just use it to get a little bit of theta decay and pocket a little pocket change. And worst case scenario, the shares get put to me and I can figure out a way to buy them. But yeah, that's mostly what I've been doing for short.
I've done exactly that as well. Probably like 5 times I've sold puts on Rocket Lab. I've never actually been put to stocks. I've always just kept the whole premium. But like, it's a smart way to, if you do get put it, you lower your cost basis. If not, you just get some cash. So,
right.
What happens? I'm just curious if you so if it goes below your strike price and you're obligated to buy the stocks and you don't have the money, or is it like the money gets locked on your account?
Well, I have a margin account, right? So technically, I would technically be in the red for a little bit, which sometimes I use that because I'll know like there's a good opportunity to buy on like the 12th or the 13th, and I get paid the 15th of the last day of every month. So I'll be like, okay, I can handle being in margin for 2 or 3 days while I wait to get my paycheck, right? So something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't normally hold too much margin unless there's just a quick swing that I need to, or I basically want to make a trade before I can make the moves in and out of savings or something like that. But that allows me to technically utilize my portfolio as collateral. So they're basically saying, hey, Matt, you have a X amount size portfolio. This, $2,500 trade won't be too big of a deal if it goes south because you have X amount of a portfolio as collateral. So they generally don't give me any hard time with that.
Cool. We have an interesting question here from the audience. P. Sesh says, what's up, fellas? Let's say I know the Rocket Lab CFO. I do. What is the one question you guys would ask him? I know the question. Please come on Rocket Lab Weekly.
I struggle with this, and because I've thought about, if I ever did get the chance to interview Adam or Peter, one of those guys, and there's so many things I want to ask that I know they can't answer, they won't be able to answer, like they're not ready to announce yet. So obviously I'd love to hear is their thoughts on their potential own assets in space and what kind of services they'd be offering. I think that would be huge. But again, he'd probably be like, I can't talk about that yet until we announce it. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. How about you, Matt? What do you think?
The short-term question I'd ask him, because me and Vince were kind of debating this last week, constructively, by the way, it wasn't that bad, but of an argument or anything like that. But I was just thinking, they have the R&D budget that's mostly allocated towards Neutron. And so, you can kind of track along. And over the past 2 years, there's been about 130 million or so that's been spent in R&D. And I know not all of that is specific towards Neutron. Some of that's obviously going to just be other things as well. But my question is like how much of the Neutron budget have they spent that they've allocated? I know several quarters ago, Spice gave a color around a question that they had about $200 million allocated. I don't know if that was 200 million point forward or if that was all encompassing 200 million to be able to develop the rocket. It seemed pretty cheap if it's only 200 million to develop a medium-sized launch rocket, but maybe it was point forward then. But that was a couple quarters ago, and here we are now, probably 3 quarters beyond that, after spending a pretty significant amount of money. So my question is, and it goes back to the cash flow question in the future, is like, are we going to get to a point where in the second half of 2024, spending on Neutron becomes very light because it's basically a lot of capital up front, but once you actually get it on the pad, then all you have to do is focus on specifically the building of the rocket, which will be $20 million or so, or maybe $30 million initially, and then the launch cost, which might be another $3 to $4 million, right? So obviously with time and reusability, that'll come down to where the gross margin of Neutron gets better. But I'm kind of curious as to, from what they have budgeted, how are they doing? Because I haven't heard much color on that in the future, in the past. And then secondly, this one isn't necessarily for me, and that would be a question I ask personally because I'm curious about future cash flows and sustainability. The question I hear a lot of people chirp up about, because I think they get so biased about what's happening at other companies, Virgin Orbit, Astra, Velo 3D, etc., where those guys are really struggling from a cash flow perspective. We have $385 million on the balance sheet at the end of the third quarter. I'm curious, we have that $100 million loan that we have to pay back by July of next year. Are they just going to roll that out? That's a curious piece that I would be curious about, because then we'd only be left with, I guess you could say, $285 million to play with if we're going to take that hit, or if we're going to roll it out and say get a $150 million loan and keep that afloat. So there's that piece. And then second part of that question would be, do they foresee at the moment kind of dipping into raising any sort of capital with where they're at today? I personally think that they're okay for the next 2 to 3 years, but some folks might be a little bit more scared. I think they're more biased towards what other companies are experiencing, not necessarily what's happening at Rocket Lab.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is something that he wouldn't be able to answer, but I would also ask him the same question, like, do you guys need to raise capital? And it could be that they even don't know, like they just feel that it's tight, and then they're hedging their bets, that because they did change the language in the last earnings call when the CFO was asked. He said, like, we have, when an analyst, I can't remember the exact question, but his answer was like, we have money to do what we said what we were going to do, which is to put Neutron on the pad. And he didn't say to be cash flow positive, and yeah, so that was. And
if you look into the 10Q a little bit, it also says, it gives a little bit of color around this specifically. It says, they don't foresee needing to raise capital within the next 12 months, but they reserve the right as the operators of the organization to do so. But they specifically said, they're at the moment, based off of 3Q, right? That could change this quarter, it could change tomorrow, but they don't foresee any need, right? Just like what you're saying. I mean, I don't think that they're going to need $385 million to get a Neutron rocket on the pad and make it successful. My thought process is they probably need another $50 to $100 million, and that would leave an additional, even with just normal burn rate, $200 million left over for normal operating expenditures and making sure that it's profitable. And then worst case scenario, the first couple Neutrons blow up and it costs them 20-30 million to make another one. The most expensive part is going to be the molds, and that's what they've already spent money on. That's the upfront costs. And now I think the cheap part is just building the rockets, which themselves, each one will probably be 30 million in the beginning, and then costs will come down with reusability and efficiencies and all that.
I'm very curious, Dave, because Matt asked you that Okay, so we were, as he said, we were discussing last week on when we think Rocket Lab is going to be profitable. And I was more on the side that I think that the Neutron spending like ramps up as they go closer to launching Neutron. My theory on this was that it's like a car factory that you like, that they will need to build multiple Neutrons at the same time, and even for customers, but they cannot launch it until it's validated, and then once it's validated, then they start launching for customers, and there's a lot of capital that is just lying around. And Matt was of the viewpoint that it's more the development that is more costly, and the actual building of the rockets is not so costly anymore. And he thought that next year in 2024 they would be cash flow positive at one point.
Yeah, personally, I don't think they'll be cash flow positive in 2024. I'd say I'm more towards like late 2025. So maybe like Q3 or Q4, they have a positive quarter is kind of what I was thinking. Just based on a few things like I've heard them say, but I think you're right that like a lot of this development money going in, they did say kind of their spending peaks around the first launch. And they shouldn't need that many first stage if they're being reused that many times. It should mostly be like, and the second stage is supposedly very cheap. So hopefully once things become operational, Neutron can start paying for itself, and then that's when they get profitable. Because I think, next year Electron will already be profitable. Space Systems should be. So
it's gonna be like 2017 all over again, right? Because Falcon 9, everyone was so like in awe of the Falcon 9 rocket, and then it took a couple times for it to land and be reusable. So I'm kind of curious, like
couple meaning 11 or something.
What's that?
You said it took a couple of times to land it, and I said couple like 11.
Did it really take 11? I didn't think it took that many times, but
no one had done it before though. So yeah.
So I'm kind of curious. I just saw a Chinese rocket do the same. It just landed as well. I'll have to pull that video clip up maybe, but I was like, I don't know. It looked kind of artificial. It looked like it was maybe a green screen or something like that. So kind of like our moon landing, I guess, in 1969. But yeah, the thought process is like, how many launches will it take? Will it take 4 launches, 5 launches? But either way, I think that the value at which we're going to send these things into space will pay for the rocket itself. I think it's just the reusability piece that will really help out. But I'm kind of curious, how many do you just need to fund your first one by yourself, and then the second one and third one and fourth one will all be based off of customers? Like, I don't know how that piece is going to work.
That's actually a very good point that you raised there, because I think they disclosed that when they launched the rocket, I hope I remember correctly, it's like it's a 10% payment that they get. So 90% of the rocket is paid, I guess, as a deposit, and then milestones, and then so it might be that makes it very easy for them to become cash flow positive, even if they're not fully launching yet for customers, because they're getting all these prepayment for milestones.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, because Peter did say in an interview they're going to try and land the first one, like their first ever launch. They're just going to try to bring it all the way back to land versus like a Starship.
God, I'm going to
so if you thought you were a little stressed out on that recent Electron return to flight, just wait till you're watching that. Like, oh my God, because you're watching like
it goes up.
Millions of dollars will just go up in flames if it explodes. So
I'm going to make a prediction. I think we're going to land it, and the next day the stock is going to be down 30%.
Oh. That's probably a pretty good prediction.
I mean, that'll be pretty impressive, because you think about it, it's like even the ULA rockets don't land themselves, right? So I mean, it would be something that's pretty unique. I know the Blue Origin ones do, and I think there's a few others that they try, but it'll be pretty unique. And I think because of the gross margin that I think Rocket Lab already sees and the transparency of it, I hope that it would have a positive inflection on the stock. But to me, I think the way I look at it is sometimes I think people get a little bit too into the numbers, myself included. But I think at the end of the day, you need to recognize that they have almost $400 million in cash. They're within a year to 18 months of putting something on a pad and launching it. And then, if that's successful, or even if they have to take a second or third try, that's going to be something that is going to help put us ahead in terms of space exploration. So even if they do need to raise capital beyond that point, it'll be something that, and Rocket Lab will be in a much better place than I think a lot of other companies, having the success of Electron and hopefully having success of a Neutron rocket, comparatively to something like an Astra or Relativity, who, and this could be an opportunity to transition, because I know Dave's got some thoughts about Relativity and some news specifically on that. But I mean, Relativity launched one rocket and said, all right, we're retiring this bad boy. Let's move to medium launch. You know what I mean? And then Astra, they said, well, we're just going to become rocket engine folks, and we're not even going to focus on the launch, but we're going to still make the Astra 4 rocket anyway. So they have a bunch of prototypes that are just sitting around, but they're not actually launching them. Which is interesting enough to kind of hear. But anyway, I think that they'll be in a league of their own, which, to be honest, I think they already are. The second most launched rocket in the United States this year alone, which I know Dave has some other information he wants to probably share about that as well. But anyway, I'll stop talking. I just think that it's continuing to build its dominance, 40-something plus launches, a public company, no other company other than private companies are doing what these guys are doing, and I think it's a really cool place to be, and awesome stock to be in.
Yeah, I mean, definitely agree with. Okay, well, obviously Virgin Orbit's out of business now. Astra, I think, for all intents and purposes, is done, unless they'll have to go private. But
can I ask you a silly question, Dave? I don't know if you have thought about that.
Sure.
They didn't really. You said this the other night. They didn't release their earnings.
Yeah.
They're going private. Why not just wait till if it was you, why wouldn't you just wait for the company to file bankruptcy, and then as investors, get a conglomerate of investors to buy it for pennies on the dollar, rather than trying to take it private today?
Yeah,
it just doesn't make sense.
It already kind of so the offer that Chris Kemp, their CEO, and what was his name? Anyway, their chief technologist guy, they were offering $30 million. So that kind of already is pennies on the dollar, because they were multi-billions of dollars of valuation at one point. But yeah, I guess.
And that factory is pretty sweet. I looked at the YouTube video. It's actually pretty sweet.
You have to believe that just the factory and a lot of the machines and stuff are worth at least $30 million. But yeah, I don't understand why we haven't heard anything on that. Anyway, so yeah, in terms of Relativity, we just had a tweet today from Tim Ellis showing a hot fire of their Aeon R engine for their next-gen rocket, which is supposed to compete with Neutron. It'll be slightly bigger. They have a first launch target of 2026 versus Neutron's a little bit more aggressive. But we haven't seen a hot fire of Archimedes yet, so some people are a little worried about that. And that's just something I've been keeping an eye on. The hot fire for Relativity did look good. So I don't know. There's a lot of things I've disagreed with how they've done and announced things, but they could be for real. We'll have to see. Are you guys at all worried about Archimedes, or do you think there's any other bottlenecks towards Neutron launching?
I'm waiting for your video on it, to be honest.
Okay.
I'm not 100%. I mean, the 3Q milestones, they wanted it to have at least I think it was a hot fire test or something like that this quarter, or at least some engine testing.
They did kind of say, I think by the end of the year they were hoping to, but we're getting pretty close here, and I haven't heard anything recently. So,
but if you guys want, I did share the Relativity did have the hot fire test on their channel. If you guys want to take a quick look at it.
Yeah,
it looks pretty cool. Their engines with that blue flame, they always look super cool. I'll always give them that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. And cool. That's at Stennis as well, which is kind of the same larger facility that Rocket Lab's going to be testing Archimedes at as well. So I just thought it just seemed very odd that at least on this one thing, relativity appears to be ahead of Neutron. But in a lot of other factors, Rocket Lab is ahead. Like we've seen them testing tanks and stuff like that. Nothing from that has happened with relativity.
Yeah, you know, it's so curious because it depends on how the design and engineering is done, and this is where I'm not a rocket engineer. That if they're developing the rocket in parallel stages, meaning that you have one team on the engine and then one team on the rocket body and then one team on other things, it's not such a big problem if the engine is delayed. But if they're doing it like the engine needs to be ready so that we have data and pressures and blah 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 for what the rocket body needs to be built and engineered to, then it can cause a delay.
Yeah, I would think it would be parallel, so they should be able. But at a certain point, if the engine's not ready, then nothing's flying. So.
Yeah, and I also feel that because they have done a rocket before, so it's like they must have a pretty good idea of what the pressures, temperatures, like what goes on in the parts of the rocket. So I don't know. It shouldn't be that hard to develop. I'm saying it from here. I'm being armchair CEO, but
it's just rocket science,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Shouldn't be that hard. Easy peasy. Yeah. Cool. So do you guys think that there is going to be a new launch, one more launch this year for Rocket Lab?
50-50.
That seems like the odds are about right. I was saying 100% no, and then someone on our Discord server pointed out that the Rocket Lab person during the live stream said, like, this is our 10th launch for the year so far. And then he's like, well, why would they say so far if this is going to be their last launch? So there could be a chance.
I think that right now the last launch or the next launch is really focused on whether or not whomever is going into space or whoever is the customer is prepared. I would say that Electron has enough ability to, within 15 to 20 days or so, turn around and continuously launch. So I think it really is just dependent upon, is the customer ready? And that's part of the thing that gets me a little bit scared for next year is at least for now, you've been at a point where Peter said, well, we're not near capacity. We're really just reliant upon, when our customers are prepared. And if they delay by 6 months, unfortunately, we have to delay. And then you have to Swiss cheese it in with how's the weather look at the time at which you want to launch it and all these sorts of things. And it gets me kind of scared for next year because it seemed like there was a lot of push for 2023. Obviously we've had the hiatus, but even before then there was a few times where it seemed like, okay, this cadence is really ramping up, where we had one in March and then two in May and then one in June, and it was like this thing is really starting to move where you're having a monthly cadence. And now we're going from basically like a once a month to almost twice a month. And so you're almost like, we've launched 40 something rockets for Electron specifically, and now you're going to do 50% of that in 1 year. So that's pretty scary. And it's like, I feel like a lot of the stars have to align a little bit. So it makes me a little bit scared to see that. But at the same time, my hope is that they have 30 particular customers that want to launch in 2024, and that if there's a customer that says, oh, we can't yet, we have to delay by 2 months, they say, okay, well, this guy's ready, so we're going to launch this candle anyway. And that's kind of my hope, is that they have this like backlog of opportunities that are spread out, let's just say over the next 18 months, that they can plug and play. So even if a contractor isn't prepared or a customer's not ready and they delay by 6 months, they have an open slot that of people that are willing to use it in that particular fashion. But my fear is if this is actually capacity, I guess my fear is like, what will be the capacity for 2025 and 2026, and how aggressive can we really ramp up, or is 6 really the max per quarter that you can do? You have 3 launch pads, so my hope would be is that you could at least get, in the near term, meaning the next 2 years or so, maybe I should say near to medium term, you can get 1 launch per month per pad, right? So that would be 3 launches a month. And so the hope would be for me that you could get at least 36 launches within the next 1 to 2 years, 1 launch per month, but that's just maybe optimistic.
Yeah, I would worry most about the customers being there for, more than 24 launches a year. They haven't really talked about going beyond that point, and the margins are already great at 24. But that was an interesting point I didn't think about, the fact that they're going from maybe 11 this year to 23 next year. Like it's a big ask, but hopefully even if they miss, like we're still talking 80% growth. So
yeah, maybe that's why they only had 3 launches in Q3, that they were like thinking with if customers delay, then they can like catch up in Q3.
I heard some theories going on Twitter, or not Twitter, it was on Discord, I think, where they're like, well, maybe they just want to push off some launches to next year so that next year looks even better and the growth looks like even more impressive. I doubt they would do that, but, kind of cool to see growth numbers like that high. It's really exciting.
Yeah. But didn't they say on the investor day 2 years ago or something that they will have 3 launch pads and they could do 1 launch a week? So wouldn't that,
yeah, they have that capacity, which is why I'm saying I think the only worry is, are there enough customers to support that?
Exactly. And if you have a Neutron, because like this is my thinking, that like there is a lot of constellations now, right? And if you need to shoot up like 20 satellites, why would you use 20 Electron launches when you can have like a 1 Neutron launch? Mm-hmm. And I like, this is what I'm wondering, if Neutron is going to eat into the Electron launches.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it shouldn't, because I feel like that dynamic is already at play with the Falcon 9 and their transporter missions and their ride shares. So it's like a similar situation but yeah, I guess with more options available for multiple rideshare missions, I guess it's possible that could eat into Electron a little bit. But I think there should always be some market for dedicated small launch. Like you just want,
yeah, for sure.
The entry price is so different, right? Like you could charge over time, the cost per launch has kind of come down slightly. It used to be 8, then it was 7.5. Now it's close to like a 7 million cost per launch. So it's like, when you think about it in that respect, it's like, well, if you just need $7 million to go to space and that's all you need, why would you do that rather than spend the 30 or 40 million or part of or 50% of the launch for a Neutron if you're, say, doing 2 ride shares or something like that? So it literally eases the entry to space. And, not everyone's going to have $25 million a pop for 50% of a Neutron or something like that. So, but sorry, go ahead, Vince. So then I have another thing that I want to ask the room.
No, I also want to ask the room something, but maybe...
No, go ahead. You go first. I can remember.
Okay, so very interesting question. I wanted to also post about this on Twitter. I think that there is, when it comes to launch, I think it's a commodity business and there is zero brand value. There is zero, like nobody's going to launch on Rocket Lab because they like Rocket Lab and they don't choose the Falcon 9. And I think that if there would be a lot of competitors, it would be like a race to the bottom, like who can basically launch for $0 or as close to zero profit as possible. But I think that the business is insanely hard. The mode of going to space. It's only very few companies that can do it, so we are safe. But what do you guys think about this?
I think as long as the reliability is comparable, you're right. But if you're at all worried about the reliability of a new vehicle or something, that will be a massive difference. So, like, let's say there's a new company X coming online with an Electron competitor. They've launched once. They're going to be like 25% cheaper than Electron. I think a lot of customers will still take Electron's reliability and heritage versus, the chance that this new rocket might blow up their, $40 million satellite or something like that. So,
yeah.
But if there's two companies very reliable, then yes. Yeah.
I still think that there's, and this needs to be said. I think that is going to be where reusability is a prime proponent of who stays in business and who doesn't. So I think right now there's the flexibility of, say, choosing a ULA Delta IV versus a Falcon 9 to get to space. But eventually, when you have so many different competitors, if you don't have that reusability aspect to your business, your margins just aren't going to be there for it to make sense. And so eventually you're going to have to drop out of the race because you're not going to have that ability to lower your costs and get your margin up. And I also think the same with almost an Electron is like, if this reusability effort turns out to be okay enough, then it might allow Electron to continue. And luckily, it seems like most people are going towards a medium launch vehicle. So there's still going to be less and less competition, I think, in the Electron space or the small launch space. But if they can get that figured out, and maybe this is two questions that I then have for the room, is 50% margin kind of where they're at today, inclusive of the reusability for Electron, or is that non-inclusive? And then second, my question was maybe some clarity, because Vince kind of noted what I had heard a few quarters ago, which is they can launch one Electron per week per pad, which means 150 odd launches a year. And at the same time, I'm hearing that 22 to 24 is kind of their capacity. And I'm wondering if one is a Rocket Lab capacity and one is a partner capacity. And maybe you can add some color to both of those. Sorry, it's like three questions in one, but
yeah. Okay. So on the margins, Adam has said that the 50-ish +% margin is at 24 launches a year, including reusability. So
including, okay, I didn't hear that part.
Yeah, we should be close to that next year with like 23, 22 launches, which, is one of the things I'm excited about. In terms of their capacity, I think it was the factory can do basically an Electron a week was like the potential capacity it could be ramped up to. So I don't think they could go beyond that. But maybe with reusability, I guess you don't have to build as many as you used to.
But so does that mean the 22 to 24, is that the TAM capacity, like the addressable market capacity that they kind of have at the moment, and that could be ramped up to say 30, 40, 50 if the customer count is there?
I feel like if the customers were there, they could do it, but they've never yet talked about going beyond 24, like after, say, 2 years from now. But they don't like to make that far forward-looking statements either. Yeah. So I guess that's a question for you guys. Like, do you think, because I was trying to model this when I was doing my spreadsheet, and I kind of kept it at like 24, 26 launches a year on an ongoing basis. But, do you guys think there's room in the market for 36 Electron launches a year?
I did the same in my model. So that would mean that I also don't think that there is, because I think that there was a trend in the space industry that we went to like smaller and smaller satellites. And then I feel like the trend now is more mega constellations, and that's more Neutron,
Yeah.
And I feel that there will be less, not less, but I think that the Electron demand will plateau out, and then the Neutron demand is the one that is going to, because with these mega constellations, because most of them is in low Earth orbit, they deorbit quite fast, as opposed to the geostationary satellites, which can be up like 20-30 years. And that means that if you have a constellation of let's say 10,000 satellites, and those satellites deorbit in 5 years. That means that every year you have to replenish 2,000 satellites. And if you can launch, let's say 100 satellites per Neutron launch, like having such a contract for Neutron, it gives you, it's a bit late here, I messed up. What did I say? 2,000, 100. So that gives you like 20 launches per year that you continuously have to do as long as the customer wants to keep the mega constellation. And for Electron, I don't see this, because I feel like if you read who the customers are, it's research group with one satellite here, one satellite there, and
yeah, I tend to agree. I think in terms of my model, that's I left it around 24, 26, and then I was like, Neutron would be the big growth going forward. But I think it's still very important that they continue to operate Electron, and like they need the funding to get through to when Neutron is making money.
Yeah. So we had a question here from the audience. Hey, everyone, what are your thoughts about the TAM change over time, let's say over the next decade? I mean, I think we were discussing this a bit. I think it's for sure increasing. That's my opinion, because there is more and more mega constellations. Like this seems to be the trend, the new trend in the space industry. And Rocket Lab is on both sides here, because they're going like there's 66% space systems, which needs to manufacture satellites. So I think if they would get, this is pure speculation, right? But if they would get the Amazon Kuiper, if they would get to produce a significant amount of those satellites, and they would get to launch those satellites, that would keep Rocket Lab very busy for a very, very long time, with the having to replenish and shoot up and replenish. And
I doubt they would get all of them, especially with Bezos running Blue Origin. But the way I think about TAM is Electron's TAM is kind of the smallest, and then space systems and Neutron are quite bigger, and then the TAM for them operating their own constellation is the largest. So there's plenty of growth as they move upward in the chain. Like they started at the smallest TAM, and they're gradually working their way up, and that's where the vertical integration is key.
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
I think that still you have so many different companies that are trying to come up with their own launch system, come up with their own satellite system. And I feel like over time, that's just going to continue to shrink, where the total addressable market will continue to concentrate around 4 to 5 companies. Whereas right now, I think people are waiting to see, does this company succeed by 2025 or 2026? And I think NASA is being patient at the moment. And I think over time, NASA and many other countries will eventually find the people that they are most comfortable with. And I think the thing that is not currently looked at appropriately by the retail investors is, and the same thing with Palantir, is who and what countries are you amicable with? So we've now just established something with Japan. We have now Australia. We have New Zealand. We have South Korea, who we are going to launch something for in 2024. And we obviously have the United States now that we have amicable launches for. So you now have 4 or 5 countries that are potentially going to use you as their key launch provider for this type of entry. And as they might be, NASA, I know, is having their contracts through Astra, Relativity. They're spreading their money around to make sure that, and try to help as many companies as they can to be able to lower costs. But eventually it's going to get to the point where there's only 4 or 5 providers. And I think it's going to concentrate. I mean, when you think about it, over time, if you continue to be in business, you will continue to get more and more of the total addressable market. And so I still think that everyone's being too patient. And I still think there's a lot of runners that need to drop out of the race before we can truly say that we are maxed out on say, Electron, or even thinking about maxing out on Neutron launches, because I think it's really only going to get bigger and bigger over time.
It's going to be very interesting over the next 5 years. We've got a lot of big players trying to bring rockets online around the same time frame, and I don't think they're all going to make it. So I don't know which ones will fail, but it is the one thing I think about NASA and governments, though, is they do, as you said, like with them being patient, they really do want to spread around their launch contracts because they don't want to let anyone grow into a monopoly. So I think they'll always spread it out as long as it's like remotely reasonable.
Yeah. Cool. So now I wanted to take a little bit of look at other space industry news. For example, ULA canceled or basically delayed their Vulcan launch to next year. And that means that ULA had 0 launches this year. And they're supposed to be a veteran, very established company. And I feel that they are the dinosaurs being disrupted here. And what do you guys think about what has happened with them?
Did ULA not launch any of their legacy vehicles this year? I know
that's what I read.
Okay, I haven't confirmed that. I just assumed they would have, but oh no, I know they launched for sure. They launched an Amazon payload. I'm not it might have been a Delta, but yeah, definitely Vulcan delayed again. Not shocking. It's been delayed so many times, but I just really feel like when Vulcan was announced, they had a great window and they've been working on it longer than anyone, where they would have been the only competitor running to Falcon 9, and they kind of missed that. And now they've taken so long that they're almost going to be somewhat out of the game by not being reusable by the time they finally do launch. So, but they do have a good backlog of contracts at least, but it's very expensive.
But okay, it's so interesting to me because in the space industry, how do you call it? You need your assets up in space to be generating income, right? So if you are 2 years or 3 years delayed on your launch, I give you an example. We last week on Rocket Lab Weekly, we read about this startup that had to raise money again because they had, who did they have? They had Virgin Orbit as their launch provider, and then they went bankrupt. Then they hopped over to Rocket Lab to launch their satellite, and then Rocket Lab had the anomaly. Yeah. So they're super unlucky, and because they are not this company, their startup is about what was it? Maybe not Earth imaging, but something in space, right? And they cannot operate and generate an income or do anything until the satellite is up and running, right? Mm-hmm. And that is a bit my question, that the customers that have contracts with them, how you have this huge backlog, but if you're 2-3 years delayed and you can just hop on over to a Neutron or a Falcon 9, how patient can you be as a customer?
It's a good question. I mean, they've already lost a bunch of launches under NSSL phase 2 because they weren't ready. The thing is, so many, a lot of their launches are government based, which I guess can be delayed. And they've also received a lot of government funding. So it might be tricky politically to pull launches for a vehicle that they've received so much public money for. Yeah. But yeah, private companies, if they're a couple years late, they'll have to remanifest onto another rocket, I would think.
Yeah. Matt, any thoughts there?
Sorry, I was just double checking I wasn't on mute. Yeah, I don't know. I think I agree with the thought that if you don't have reusability, you're going to be SOL, shit out of luck.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, and then the next piece of news is that SpaceX last year, we heard, was going to get they're raising money at 175 billion valuation which was a almost 29 price to sales ratio. And that valuation went even higher to 180 billion this week. And it looks like it has a bunch of extras to it, meaning like current shareholders are able to sell shares at that price if people are interested. So that's possibly, not possibly, I guess that's very good for early SpaceX employees and people who hold a lot of SpaceX stock. And what I'm curious about is, people get pissed when I compare Rocket Lab to SpaceX, and to a degree I understand, because SpaceX is way more ahead of Rocket Lab. But in my logic, if SpaceX has now their price to sales is 30, and I believe Rocket Lab is 9 point something, like, can't Rocket Lab get a little bit more love because SpaceX is doing so good and this shows like their future, where they're going? Or what do you think about this?
I think it's a good argument, especially when you're talking price to sales. Like, that's kind of an apples to apples comparison. It's just tough though, because there's so much excitement around Starlink, which people expect to just, explode in revenue over the next 2 years. Whereas, the revenue growth and Rocket Lab's own constellation is a little further out. So that might have a little to do with it. But
yeah, I think that at the moment there needs to be constant satellite and Electron launch churn to be able to get the revenue. And there's a lot to be said about reoccurring revenue streams that are consistent and subscription based that I think a lot of people love, right? I mean, that's why Amazon has Prime. That's why Apple has Apple Music. That's why, all these companies are switching to this reoccurring revenue stream models, because people value that so high. And so I think until we get to that point, Rocket Lab is going to be challenged. Also, I think as well, people don't think that Rocket Lab is maybe as prolific. I still think that a lot of people don't understand that there's been 40 plus launches. I think they categorize a Rocket Lab with an Astra and with a Relativity, where they have like single digit, if not less than 5-digit launches under their belts. And when you explain it to people, their eyes light up. They're like, how do I not know about this? Right? How am I just hearing about this? So I think that really it's, people also don't really know about ULA either. But I think it's a piece. It might just be you losing me.
No, I hear you perfect.
Okay. Yeah. So I think it's just a little bit about marketing and how the people maybe push themselves with respect to, I don't know, being out on the market. And I think that these guys are more execution folks rather than huge marketers, right? Because even at some point, Astra was valued way more than a Rocket Lab, but yet had the cadence of launching at least once or 2 times a quarter, if not 3 times a quarter. But Astra launched 4 times, and then they retired the rocket. So anyway,
so Dave is having some technical issues. We hope to see him back. What was I going to say? Yeah, like on the valuation, like what do you think is, because like I know, okay, let me ask you this. So based, like, what do you think is a fair value today for Rocket Lab as the company is?
That's tough. I mean, I just did some back of the envelope math. If you were to put next year's revenue and price of sales from SpaceX, just kind of getting there, 175, 185 billion, that would put the market cap at about 11.6. I think that's a little bit high at the moment for a Rocket Lab. So I could see half that, because we're going to probably get about 200 million in revenue this year. So, I mean, if you want to say 5.8 to 6 billion, I think that that's not something that's too far-fetched, specifically with the opportunity that's in front of a Rocket Lab. But right now we're sitting at about 2.5 billion, a little bit less of that now that the share price has pulled back from $5. But I don't know. I don't think 2.5 billion at the moment is that absurd of valuation. I think it's cheap, yes. If we start launching Neutron rockets and we also get a cadence of about 20 to 24 rockets a year, and our revenue is at about, let's just say 600 million or so, I'm going to find it very hard to have a $2.5 to $3 billion market cap. I could easily see something in the 8 to 10 billion before, and that still I think would be rather cheap, personally, because that would be closer to a 15x price to sales. And you could honestly say at 600 million, you could go up to 18, 20 billion if you wanted to have the same similar price to sales of a SpaceX. But I think the thing that everyone's kind of curious about is, will this thing make money? And I think at 500 to 600 million in revenue, without crazy spend on a Neutron rocket, and that actually generating revenue itself, I think it's going to make some money. I mean, your gross margins are going to climb to the high 20s this year, if not low 30s on an adjusted basis. So, meaning next year in 2024. So, I mean, next year they should walk away with about $150 million in gross profit. And then you're looking then at just minimizing your total spend for SG&A and research and development costs. So if you're able to continue, get that to 500, 600 million, there's no reason why in 24 months this company shouldn't be at least cash flow break even. Anyway, just food for thought.
Yeah, sorry, I missed a bit there, but I was just thinking, unfortunately, I don't think Rocket Lab has the same hype factor SpaceX does going for it. And so, we talk about all these comparisons, but ultimately the thing I've been looking forward to like this entire time is, when they're profitable, they have a price to earnings that is, say, 20, and the compound annual growth rate for the future is projected at like, say, 35%. And then that will just like you can't argue against that at that point. So
yeah, so what do you guys think is going to move the stock? And here we clearly know successful rocket launches move the stock down. So what do you think will move the stock up in the near future? Because it's funny, all of us think that the stock is very cheap. I think it's crazy cheap. Based on my model, like I would be a buyer of this stock even in the 6s. And after that, I wouldn't think with the risk that is in it, it's cheap. But what do you think is holding the stock at below 5? And when do we see a motion from here?
Yeah, I just go back to like until there's price to earnings, we may still be in this range, I think, unfortunately.
But then you think we're going to do like a Tesla, that we go like sideways and then we're profitable and then we go like boom 25? Or
I think it might end up being like that. Yeah.
Wow.
There might be doubters until they're profitable.
Yeah.
I'd like to be wrong. I'd like to see the price to sales continue to drop lower, and then that supports a higher stock price, or just seeing progress on Neutron supports a higher stock price. Like, we've seen a lot of progress over the past year that hasn't been reflected in the stock price yet. So,
I mean, to be honest, for the retail, it would be like a dream come true if that's how it would happen, because, like then people can really like buy and buy and buy and build like super big positions. Mm-hmm. And then, because I think that's what happened with Tesla, that it had a retail following and people were like hyping each other up. And there was a lot of people with very significant positions when the stock actually mooned.
I mean, I think that SpaceX isn't too far removed when it was a $30 to $50 billion valuation. And I think the thing that really amplified that was the fact that they got super profitable with Starlink. And I think once you establish that, I believe Dave is right. I think that'll provide the floor to the stock. Is there catalysts that, let's just say they have $100 million quarter? I think that'll be a catalyst to the stock, but will it sustain? That is a difficult one to answer. And I think that everyone still at their moment is thinking that there's only one space company. They're not going to invest in it until it goes public. And that's Starlink / SpaceX. And at the end of the day, I think that you need to prove those people wrong. And the things that will be catalysts are a successful Neutron on the pad, a launch, but that might just be temporary bumps to the stock. And until you have that earnings that Dave is talking about, you won't really have that floor. And you really need that floor to truly and confidently move that stock up and to the right. And so until you get to that point and you prove people wrong that this is a potential profitable business, I think you're going to be kind of banging your head against the wall until that point. So I still think that also people have a lot of concern about the cash burn because of their bias towards what they've seen in Astra and many other companies. And
so here's a question for you then. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, you're good.
Do you think maybe if we kind of agree on that, do you think we hopped in too early?
Oh yeah, I know I'm 100% early.
Okay.
But I'd rather be in than not. Like, this is my mantra always, is I'm always looking for opportunities to be in a place where I'm probably a little bit early, just like with Palantir, and I can literally see the march towards profitability, because then I can guarantee that I'm in before it's too late. Right. Because my fear is you buy into something before it's too late. And there's two catalysts that I always kind of look for my speculative positions. It's before a company hits sort of sustained profitability on like a GAAP EPS basis. So there's that, and Palantir achieved that, and so that's been a positive catalyst for the stock, and I think that'll continue. Or cash flow break even, and Rocket Lab fits in between both of that. And what I mean by that is like Dutch Bros is a perfect example of this. These guys make a crap ton of money. They're making like 100, and they're going to make like 150, 160 million in EBITDA this year. But the problem is their CapEx budget is 225 to 250 to build new stores. So everyone's just sitting there like, these guys are spending like drunken sailors. So, they can't sustain at that sort of pace. And so Rocket Lab, I think, is a twofer, right? They have a capital intensive business because they're obviously trying to get this Neutron rocket onto the pad. And then second, they have yet to really hit GAAP profitability. But on an adjusted basis, I think they're doing really well. So we'll see. I mean, I think I always tell people, I'm like, I think that you're too early. I think people have until mid next year before it really starts to get to a point where, and a lot of that has to do with the cash burn, right? We're burning like 25 to 30 million, 35 million sometimes a quarter in cash. Last quarter was a lot more, I think, because a lot of the research and development costs associated with Neutron. But I think that, yes, and I tell people a lot, like, I would say that there is probably benefit, especially from a risk standpoint, for people to wait another 6 to 12 months from here until some of these catalysts are realized. And I still think that the stock will be cheap enough, meaning $5.50, $6 a share, where a lot of the risks have been removed and the opportunity of it going up and to the right is more guaranteed. So for them, from a capital exposure risk perspective, it's might be too risky for a lot of people here. But in 2-3 quarters, when you start getting more Neutron criteria checked off the list, you know for a fact it's going to be on the pad. You have established a good cadence of $100 million quarters in your belt. A lot of that capital exposure decreases, but I don't think that there'll be enough of a catalyst to put the stock into the $10 range. So I think that a lot of folks, specifically people that are concerned about risk, can wait from here. But to me, I'm okay if the stock goes down 20, 30%, and I continue to establish a position over the course of a couple of years, because I'm more about understanding and looking for the long term. Now, if somehow things change drastically and I didn't think that they were headed towards profitability, then maybe I would, completely change my thesis on the stock and dump things. And I've done that in the past before as well. But for now, I see the vision, I align with the vision, and I can slowly see the stair step towards profitability. So for me, I'm fine that it's too early. Do you think we're too early?
I was just wondering, because I've been in it for a while, and I was like, wow, I could have been in Palantir, sold that, and bought into Rocket Lab now. But yeah, it just goes back to timing, and like I'd rather be in it and wait longer as opposed to missing a move when it does happen. So I'm fine holding for the long term. But I guess it's pretty clear, like if it's been flat over the past year, that money could have done other things. But I still think it's a great company.
Yeah, I think this is pure gold, this topic that we're bringing up here, because I've been in Palantir for we also had a year or even a year and a half when I was even down 50+% on the position, right? And then I was also looking like, the money could be in other stocks. And then the problem is that when things turn favorable, they turn favorable so fast that you just don't have the time to get in. And I think that you have to zoom out. And the way I have to look at it is, yes, like this year I'm up like year to date 200% on Palantir, but in the 2 and something plus years of owning it, I'm up 85% or something like this. No, it's probably over 100% now. And then you go back and you're like, okay, that's a 45% per year average, but it didn't, like, it was like minus 50%, and then so it evens out, and that's a fantastic return. And I just want to give another example. I was very bullish on a company called Enphase, solar company, and then I changed. I didn't actually have money to be able to buy into the stock, but when the Fed came out with the higher for longer, and they came out with their earnings, and they were super affected with the interest rates, I was like, okay, I'm not bullish on this company because they need to fix the demand problem. The stock was at 120. They crashed down to $70. And I was like, if this stock goes to $50, that's when I would buy in. Now, Papa Powell came out and he said that the interest rates are, there is rate cuts. And Enphase in 2 days or something went from 70 back to 120.
Wow.
And this is basically the risk. What people are having with Rocket Lab is that, yes, if you're early, the risk that you're taking is that we might have a year or two that is flat, and then we, maybe 4 or 5x when it becomes profitable. But if you don't take that risk, it could be that you're looking at the stock and you're like, okay, now I hear on the news that they're profitable, and you look at the stock price and it's $25,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, seen it too many times. I've told myself, I'm too late now. And so many times when you see that stock, I know every investor has watched a stock and thought about buying it and then just seen it move super quick. We've all been through that.
Yeah. Cool, guys. I think this was a fantastic episode. I really enjoyed talking to both of you. I hope we can do this again.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And is there anything else you guys want to add before we end?
No, good episode. Really looking forward to more and more details coming out in Q4 for this thing. And we're only, a month and a half away probably from an earnings report. So should be good to close out. Curious to see if we get another launch, but I guess we'll talk about that more next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could get another launch, drop another 10%, and looking at a billing opportunity.
There you go.
Yes, we can predict next year 22 launches. That's minus 220% down.
Yeah.
So,
how the math works. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Have a great Sunday.
Absolutely.
It's early Saturday for you, and See you next week. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you guys. Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers.